Hi everyone. My project is on the history of Jim Davis, the creator of Garfield, and his works before Garfield. The two comics he did were Norm Nat and John. Before he started working on both of those, he was an assistant to Tom K. Ryan, who's the creator of Tumbleweeds, which ran from 1969 to 2007. Davis assisted from 1969 to 1978. He did the inking, the borders, and the backgrounds and balloons. He also answered a lot of the fan mail. While doing this, he got a feeling of what it was like to have a comic, like a syndicated comic. Answering the fan mail, he realized he doesn't want to work with human characters. Davis stated that during that time, I got the discipline of hand, but I found answering his fan mail that I did not want to work with human characters, particularly because everything he did or said someone was taking offense, but not with the animals. Because of this, it sparked his idea for Norm Nat. Norm Nat ran from 1973 to 1975. It ran in the Pendleton Times. It was the only newspaper to essentially believe in him. He sent the comic out to others and he never heard back. He tried many times to get it syndicated. He faced rejection and was told from a syndicate editor that your gags are good, or your gags are great, but bugs. Nobody can relate to bugs. His troubles with Norm Nat caused these strips to mostly be undiscoverable. Jim Davis himself claims that it ended with Norm being squashed, but in 2020, a YouTuber discovered many of the comics in the Pendleton, Indiana Library archives. He scanned and printed them and then released them, which showed the last Norm Nat comic released was him thanking Pendleton. And here is the very first Norm Nat comic, and the very last, which goes against what Davis has said himself. So these comics aren't very well known. Because bugs were unpopular, Davis started looking at other comics and noticed a trend with dogs but no cats, which then he created the character of Garfield. Davis said, I took a good look at the comic pages and realized there were lots of dog strips, Snoopy, Marmaduke, Belvedere, but no cats. That was my eureka moment. This is when he created Garfield. The character of Garfield debuted in Jim Davis's strip John. John ran from 1976 to 1977. Again, it was only published in the Pendleton Times. John featured John and Garfield, John's roommate Lyman, which is a nod to a character in Norm Nat, and his dog Spot, who evolved into Odie. So here is the very first John strip, which has Garfield, who looks very different, and then the very last John strip. He changed the name to Garfield September 1st, 1977. He made this decision because he had a conversation with T.K. Ryan, and Ryan made note of Garfield being the star and being featured the most. Garfield had all the good lines, so the name was changed. Here's a couple other Norm Nat comics. Here are a few of the John comics, which feature Lyman and John, or Lyman and Spot. Spot's name was changed to Odie almost immediately because Davis realized that Spot was like a stereotypical dog name for comics. And when the character of Lyman was slowly written out, many of his lines were then given to Garfield. He started adapting his old comics from Norm Nat and John into Garfield. He sort of tweaked them to fit the style of Garfield better. So here is one comic that has started in Norm Nat and then again debuted in Garfield. And then here is another one that was a Norm Nat comic, and again, Garfield. And then this was John's very first comic, which then again debuted in Garfield, but this comic was not the very first Garfield comic. And then here's another one, which was, I believe, debuted in both, was again John and Garfield. Davis stated that Garfield resonated with people for a couple reasons. Number one, I tried to keep the gags broad and humor general and applicable to everyone. Most of the gags were about eating and sleeping. Everyone could relate. And with this, Davis speaks to like his simplistic style of comics. He states he was always bad at drawing, so he put words to pictures growing up. And he also did theater, which he relates to his comics in the sense of like scripting and staging. He chooses what to include in the comics. Davis said that it's very simplistic but relatable. And this is kind of like how his art style has adapted through the years. This first picture is a picture of Garfield and John, and then Garfield in the very first Garfield comic, and then in 1978, Davis, with his comic getting syndicated, changed the style of Garfield again. And then this is kind of just an evolution of his style. Davis's style kind of changed as comics changed in newspapers. Garfield's eyes got bigger and mouth got bigger because strips in newspapers got smaller, so people were able to read the expressions more. And then in around 1900, when the show was getting adapted that he worked on, his style changed again because he wanted Garfield to stand, and Charles Schulz, the creator of Peanuts, helped him change from Garfield standing on all fours to walking on two legs. Thank you.